We have that list of Muslims who were extradited recently, of course. We have also Gary McKinnon, who was not. We have, though, in the past, as I mentioned earlier on, the NatWest 3, Giles Darby, David Birmingham, Gary Mulgrew, who were accused of defrauding the NatWest. And 28th November 2007, they pleaded guilty to one count of wire fraud in exchange for other charges being dropped. They were indicted in Houston, Texas, on 7 counts of that. We also have Christopher Tappin, retired businessman, extradited to the US on charges of selling weapon parts to Iran. And he faces trial shortly. Let's speak to Mohammed Shafiq from the Ramadan Foundation. Mohammed, good morning.
Good morning, Nicky.
Hi there. We asked the question this morning on your call about this, a very simple question. Did Gary McKinnon's race help keep him in the country? We've also got David Davis, I'm delighted to say, Tory MP. Good morning.
Good morning.
Former Shadow Home Secretary. Mohammed Shafiq, why do you think this is blatant racism?
Well, let's be very clear. We've got Talha Ahsan, who suffers from Asperger syndrome, same as Gary McKinnon. And clearly, he was also suicidal, according to members of his family. And there's a real fear that if he was extradited to the United States, that his health would suffer, his human rights would suffer. The same thing with Gary McKinnon. And, let me be very clear, Nicky. I'm not saying that Gary McKinnon should be sent. I'm very happy for him, his family, and Janice, his mother. But we believe that, there's a double standard. When you're Muslim, you're black or Asian, you get extradited to the United States. But if you're white and suffer from a medical condition, like Gary does, then you will be kept here. And the irony of the Home Secretary, Theresa May, using the Human Rights Act, which she's been vilifying for the past few years, the Tories have been vilifying for the last few years, is breathtaking. That she used the same legislation that she thinks is impeding Britain's progress to argue that Gary McKinnon should not be sent.
David Davis, former Shadow Home Secretary, does he have a point?
No, I don't think he does, in truth. Mohammed will know, as many of your listeners won't, that one of the other campaigns, other than Gary McKinnon's, that I run was on behalf of Binyam Mohammed and on Rangib Ahmed and a number of other Muslims who we think were tortured with the complicity of the British government. So I don't think I have to make an argument on myself. Let's come back to the government, however. Did it alter their decision that he was white rather than Muslim? I don't think so at all. First thing to say is we understand, we don't have hard evidence, we understand it's an incredibly close decision. Second thing is, I don't know anything about Mr. Ahsan's Asperger's, but what we do know is a number of doctors actually said, not just his family, but a number of doctors, Home Office approved doctors said of Mr. McKinnon that he would very likely commit suicide. Not might, very likely. That was the probability that he would commit suicide. And I think that was, at the end of the day, what moved the case. What's more, there are, as you've already highlighted, a number of white, I don't know, Christian or whatever they are, but white people who have been deported, and in my view, actually with almost equal injustice to Mr. McKinnon. The Tapping case is one case in point. So I don't think there's any case here at all. I'm really rather surprised at Mohammed taking this line. I think, truthfully, this was a humanitarian case. It was, incidentally, by the way, I wanted to correct something, Nicky, that you said earlier. You said, this is very serious and lots of costs. So it is alleged. Actually, what did he do? What did McKinnon do? This was not a terrorist offence or some very, very serious offence. What he did was he went hunting around and he got into the Pentagon computer. How did he do that? He typed the word password into the password access point. What I want to see is the case for negligence being brought against the US officer who set that software system up. The $750,000 they claim they spent on this probably was spent fixing the system that McKinnon exposed. So yeah. I don't think...
I was seeking to reflect what Julian Knowles QC had told us earlier on.
I know. Yeah. And indeed what Alan Johnson, the previous Home Secretary, said earlier. I'm not picking a fight with you. I'm just saying, let's be clear about the nature of the offence. And it just seems to me, it's rather sad. This should be a day for celebration on 2 counts, and Mohammed should join us on at least one of them.
Well, he is. He did say that, to be fair to him.
I think, the celebration on 2 counts. One, that Gary is, not his life is not going to be put at risk. But second, by a bad system. But secondly, that something's going to be done about that system. That we're going to have this so-called forum test, and that will help everybody.
Mohammed Shafiq, you've heard what David Davis has said with his usual characteristic clarity. But there's another point as well, which I think he touched on too, that Mr. McKinnon was accused of, looking for a conspiracy about UFOs, whereas Mr. Ahsan, Talha Ahsan, was accused of running a website encouraging young Muslims in the West to support Mujahideen causes in Afghanistan, Chechnya and Bosnia.
Well, according to the United States, I can just say David has got a great record in civil liberties, and I've supported him in the past, including his by-election. So, we're not questioning David's credibility, but we are questioning the government's credibility when it comes to this issue. Why could it not announce the forum proposals to consider whether somebody could be charged in this country 2 weeks ago when the 5 was sent? I don't have an issue about the 3, Abu Hamza and others who've been extradited, who've been accused of serious terrorist activities in the United States, but Babar Ahmed and Talha Ahsan could have been put on trial here in the UK, and they were willing to be put on trial. There's a perception out there, whatever the establishment say in Westminster or Whitehall, out there in the country, there is clearly feelings that people feel that there is a double standard.
But you haven't acknowledged the question about the different nature of the crimes, looking for UFOs.
Well, Mickey, if you look at
jihadism.
Well, with respect, if you look at what the United States government has said, they said this was the largest infringement of their secure sites in a very long time, and so you would think that with those sort of allegations against that Gary McKinnon,
he was looking for little green men.
Well, he says he was looking for green men, and so I'm not. Like I said, I'm very, very happy for Gary and his family. I don't believe anybody should be sent to the United States on these sort of trials. They should be put on trial in this country. We've got a great impartial justice system with integrity.
So we do have an impartial justice system with integrity.
Absolutely.
But you're just telling us this morning we don't.
No, I'm saying when it comes to putting people on trial, that evidence should have been presented to a judge in this country, and our citizens should have been put on trial here.
Okay, David Davis.
Well, we did. Look, there are two issues here. Let's deal with the issue of whether they should be tried here. I don't know enough, frankly, about the Talha Ahsan case to authoritatively comment on whether he should have been tried here or not. I think Babar Ahmed should have been tried here probably a long, long time ago.
David, Talha is accused exactly of the same crime.
Yeah, all right. Well, then maybe he should have been tried here too. But the truth of the matter is that the previous government signed up to this proposal. I opposed it at the time. You'll remember, Mohammed.
Yes, I do, yeah.
And they signed up to it, and they signed up on the basis of essentially, they said terrorist, very serious offences, terrorism and paedophilia were the two issues they raised. So I've long argued that people should be tried where they commit the crime, if that's available. Now, that wasn't available, and we've still got to go through the process of renegotiating with the USA and actually introducing the new law into the House of Commons. It's all a good thing it started, and frankly, if it had been in my court, it would have started earlier, but I don't think it's got anything to do with race. It's got to do with the slowness of the Home Office coming to its decisions, not to do with race at all.
Let's speak to you. You say you don't know much about the
not enough
Ahsan case.
Not enough to authoritatively comment.
Well, you can listen to his brother Hamja Ahsan. Good morning.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for coming on the show. David Davis has acknowledged that he doesn't know enough about this case. Would you enlighten all of us about your brother?
Yeah, David Davis and Julian Knowles just asserted false information here because Talha has an assessed suicide risk that was provided by medical doctors in a British prison and even from an American criminologist. So Julian Knowles said something completely false, saying there wasn't suicide risk present. They have the same assessed suicide risk, Gary McKinnon and Talha. And I think we're putting a bit of... I'm someone who campaigned for Gary McKinnon. I campaigned for Richard Adwyer. I campaigned for Barbara. But we're putting a bit too much spin on what Gary McKinnon said. I mean, he left a message on an American computer saying U.S. foreign policy is akin to government-sponsored terrorism these days. It's not a mistake to use security standard on September 11th. I am solo. I will continue to up at the highest levels. That's what he put on an American computer. That's not looking for green men.
Tell me about your brother's Asperger's and how that may have driven any obsession that he's alleged to have had in a jihadist website.
This it's about my brother's vulnerability, and my brother's a vulnerable citizen, just like Gary McKinnon. And let's bear in mind that, half of prison suicides take place in solitary confinement in America, and these conditions, putting someone 24 hours a day without any human contact, without access to their family, is, as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture said, torture. There's no ifs and buts. That's
say, if I was to say to Gary McKinnon's mum, did he tap into computers? She would say.
I love Gary McKinnon's mum.
She would say yes. So if I were to say to you, did your brother help run websites encouraging young Muslims to go in?
I'd like to clarify. Let's be precise and be precise, responsible journalism. My brother's accused of having marginal association, allegedly, with a website that was obsolete for 5 years at the time of his arrest. And he had
what's a marginal association? I'm only trying to find out for our listeners.
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure he's not. And when you say running and administering, these aren't. So the U.S. indictment alleges he distributed some DVDs about Bosnia, and says that constitutes aiding and abetting. And as I said, Talha's never been convicted, found guilty. The extradition law, which is appalling a bit of law, and I agree with you. It's not just about Muslims. It's about the basic elements of British justice for British citizens. All these basic things: the presumption of innocence before guilty, the cornerstone of a justice system, that's thrown out of the window. All these basic rights, like access to your family, habeas corpus, they're all thrown out the window out of a dumb piece of legislation that even David Blunkett regrets introducing in 2003.
But let's be clear, we agree about that. I mean, some of us have fought this for a very long time. Some of us wanted.
There was a complete cross-party consensus on it. It's a completely silly piece of legislation that should have been scrapped.
Well, sadly, there wasn't a cross-party consensus. Actually, it was a raw fight in the House of Commons, in effect, over this.
85% of Parliament, when polled by Liberty.
Eventually, but they didn't say so publicly. That was part of the problem. If there'd been 85% of the votes on my side, we would have won.
Every single member of the cabinet.
Okay, David Davis, are you enlightened listening to Hamja?
I'm a little bit, but I don't think there are two issues that are being asserted here. Number one, that this procedure is terrible. We agree. Number two, that the reason Gary was stopped and Talha Ahsan was not stopped from going abroad is race. We don't agree. I mean, that seems to me to be nonsense. We absolutely agree that this is a bad system, that actually it would be much better if some of these people, not all of them, some of these people had been tried in Britain long ago when the case was fresh and so on.
I'm very glad we could agree on that.
And there's never been any doubt about that.
Can I add that Gary McKinnon was granted bail as a result of his Asperger's syndrome, whereas my brother was detained for the equivalent of a 12-year sentence without being found guilty of anything.
Yeah, now this is,
and he has the exact same thing, Asperger's syndrome.
Right, this is where the actual crime becoms an issue. That's the alleged.
Okay, David Davis, what do you mean? The alleged crime then becomes an issue.
That's whether the alleged crime becomes an issue. Because, all right, what Mr. Ahsan has said is that Gary left comments on the US computers, and I'm sure he did, and I'm sure that's one of the things that provoked them to be so cross about it. But the simple truth is he's not accused of terrorism, or aiding and abetting terrorism, and the conditions for bail are different there. Now, as I say, I don't know enough detail to say, well, actually, Mr. Ahsan should have been granted bail or not. But with a very different crime, you have very different levels of
if he had just been handing out DVDs to encourage people to go and fight for the cause which he believes in Bosnia, is that worthy of extradition and time in a supermax jail and solitary confinement? Do you feel?
Well, I see, again,
I said if.
No. Well, two things. I mean, firstly, there's an if, and if they are inciting people to murder, which is what that amounts to, then it deserves a suitable punishment. But the thing you're conflating is the agreement that people should spend a lot of time in supermax jails and so on. That's why many of us opposed this proposal in the first place, that the pressure it puts on people. And that would have been true. It's true of Tapin too. It's true of, as you said, of the NatWest 3. I mean, they were basically coerced into a guilty plea by the system.
There's another issue, though, David Davis, which I'm sure Mohammed Shafiq will agree with, which is a deeper issue, which Gary McKinnon was a huge public campaign for Gary McKinnon, led by the press, led by the Daily Mail. If Gary McKinnon
actually led by his mother. Led by his mother. Let's be clear
absolutely,
about it.
Absolutely led by his mother. But the newspapers were. I think this is an important point. And There was this campaign. His mother has been incredible in that campaign. If he had been, Ahmed McKinnon, would there have been the public sympathy? This is the racism in our society. Would the newspapers have been behind it?
Let me give you. I started off by reminding your audience, your listeners, of some other campaigns I run, and one of them related to Binyam Mohammed. Who Mohammed will be very familiar with, and on that case, I had out-and-out support from the Daily Mail, surprisingly you might think, from the Times. In fact, I think the only two papers who didn't support us were the Sun and the Telegraph at the end of the day. So, our society is able to be just about these things.
I'm going to let you come in a minute. Hamja, and I will come back to you, and I give you that solemn promise.
Yeah.
But I want to take some calls. We're going to come back, and we've got calls coming up. Michelle has the travel news. Then to the calls.
I do, yes. An update in Berkshire on the M4 London bound between Junction 6 at Slough and Junction 5 at Langley. There was one lane closed because of an accident for 3 hours until 9 o'clock this morning. It has now reopened, but left heavy congestion back to Reading at Junction 11, and those delays were over 2 hours, but obviously they'll start to get better now. The M62 eastbound between 10 at Croft and 11 at Birchwood. A broken down vehicle is partially blocking the road and causing congestion back to Junction 7, adding about an hour and 20 minutes onto your journey. The M60 clockwise between 17 at Prestwich and 18 at Simister Island. An accident is blocking 2 lanes and causing very slow traffic. The southbound M40 between High Wycombe and Loudwater, that's junctions 4 and 3. Because of an accident, 1 lane is closed on that stretch, causing very slow traffic. The M3 northbound, very slow between junction 14 for the M27 to junction 11 at Winchester South. That's due to an earlier accident. The M27 itself westbound, not too bad now on approach to junction 4 for the M3, but still very slow from 11 at Fareham down to 7 at Hedge End. And Chichester, the A27 eastbound at Fishbourne roundabout, because of an earlier broken down vehicle, very slow traffic, delays in fact of about half an hour. Michelle Dignan, 5Live Travel.
Formula One. The Korean Grand Prix.
Download 5Live's Checkered Flag podcast for post-race interviews, analysis and reaction.
Round the final corner, there is the checkered flag, and Sebastian Vettel wins in Korea. It's a 3rd race victory in a row. Singapore, Japan, Korea, and he's into the championship lead with 4 races to go.
Yeah! Go to bbc.co.uk/5Live and click on podcasts. This is 5Live Breakfast. Your call.
Let's get a measure of what people are saying. Keep your comment. Lots of calls, and we've got some really good people talking about this with David Davis, Mohammed, Shafiq and Hamja Ahsan. So apologies not to come to a call sooner. So make your point as pithy as you can. Iqbal, Manchester, Peter in Guildford, John in London, Adnan in London. Adnan, what do you say?
Yeah, good morning, Nicky.
Morning.
I was listening yesterday to the news when the government or they decided not to send Mr. McKenna. I'm, by the way, happy for him not to be sent to the United States. Mind you, Mr. Davis now just mentioned very important things said about that, the crime. Come on, the crime. Mr. McKenna stopped computers in the very sensitive computers in the United States for 24 hours. But that's not my point. My point yesterday, as a British Muslim, I felt yesterday alienated by my own government. I'm a British Muslim. For the first time in my existence in this country, I felt so alienated. I felt I do not belong here. That's what the government is telling me. You're a Muslim. If you commit any stupid thing, not a crime, any stupid thing, you'll be taken to court and thrown into prison. Yesterday, that made it absolutely clear for me.
So this is what a lot of you feel. You feel like a second class. Iqbal, do you? Iqbal in Manchester. Did you feel the same way as Adnan?
Nicky, how are you doing? You okay?
Yeah, how are you?
Right, I'm fine, tip top. Right, I just want to say that carrying on from Adnan's point about doing any stupid thing. That's the point, isn't it? If you do a stupid thing, then you're deserving of some of the consequences that come from that. For example, now I'm a practicing Muslim. I as a Muslim, I have a noticeably large beard. I get strange looks all the time. Point is, that I go about my daily business in this country. I work. I'm an IT consultant, and I'm doing quite well. And point is that I go about my daily business, and outside of that, I go about my duties as a Muslim. I pray. I do everything I can as a Muslim in this country. And I've never had any issues with the authority. I've never had any issues when these people talk about airports.
Wait till you have an issue, and then you will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, just a second. Let me make my point. And I've never had an issue. And now the other thing is, if now these people were in some other country, like Saudi Arabia or in Pakistan, you wouldn't even be having this conversation. The other thing is, I know personally of a story. I mean, it's now coming up to, we're in the actual month of Dhul Hijjah, so the Muslims are going to make Hajj. Point is, I know of a personal story of some guys that I know who were over making Hajj in Saudi Arabia, and they were in a large group, and they went to the restaurant together, and two of them were picked up by the police and thrown in jail overnight because of some suspicion they were with some sort of a group. And it turns out one of them was a student at the University of Medina, and the other guy was from Hajj from the UK. And the point is, there's no.
Come on, the 90 days stopping you in prison without a trial, without even saying what is your crime. That was exactly meant for you and me as a Muslim people. They did not do it to anyone else.
Yeah, but hold on. Look. I read, I mean, I don't know about Assam or whatever his name is, but I read about Babar Ahmed and some of the allegations that were against him. And to be honest, I was one of the signatories on the petition for him not to be extradited to the US. But when I read some of the allegations, then in my heart, I was not convinced that this person was entirely innocent. He must have done something in order for the US to be after him. There's no smoke without a fire. I mean, that guy, Abu Hamza, to be honest, I've got no sympathy for that guy. Some of the things that guy said, I don't wish anybody to go.
He was a blight on Muslim communities in this country, wasn't he?
Exactly. Some of the things he said were absolutely atrocious. And I'm not surprised he's in the mess that he's in at the moment.
Let's speak to Peter in Guildford. And you made the points very well. I want to hear from people, but Iqbal, you've made your points very clearly and eloquently. Peter, what do you say in Guildford? Hi. Well, I've got her point as well. Peter, go on. Are you there?
Hi there.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I've listened to the points from the other callers, and I think there's a number of very valid points there, but I do still feel that Gary McKinnon would have been extradited if he was, as you said, Ahmed McKinnon. I do believe that, and I think that's a very unfortunate situation. George Galloway made the point earlier that this is a perception that the Muslims will now have of the judicial process in this country, that it has a bias towards and against people of the Islamic faith. I have to say, I don't blame him for feeling that. I mean, Talha Ahsan has Asperger's syndrome. He's now going to be put in solitary confinement in a supermax prison in America. And the doctors in this country did say that he had a suicide risk. And we've sort of lost our sovereignty here by giving up our rights, and I think that's a point that David Davis agreed with.
Okay, it's interesting that he did. I mean, Hamja Hassan, I'll come to you in 1 second. Let's hear from John now in London. John, good morning.
Good morning.
Quick point, sir.
Refreshing to hear your caller from Manchester, actually. I agree with David Davis, and I think that this guy, it wouldn't matter whether he was Muslim, Mormon, Christian, born-again Christian, or the monster raving loony party. I think the fact is he wasn't preaching. He was an anorak with too much time on his hands and being mischievous. I don't think he had any terrorism or intent of terrorism, and he certainly wasn't preaching hatred and destruction of the country. And I think it's a bit rich for anyone that preaches hatred for the system and then wants the system to defend it. And I think that Galloway is being divisive, and I think Theresa May has been very clever because it's game, set and match. For an act that's been vilified for a few years now at least, she's actually shown that it can be used to the good of and with popular support. And had he been Ahmed, I forgot his surname now, this chap that's just been allowed to stay, he would have had my support because he wasn't a terrorist.
Okay, Hamja Hassan, you hear that? He was just. I promised to come back to you, Hamja.
Okay.
I'm wary of that. An anorak with no malign intent.
Sure, I just want to get back on this Daily Mail point, which is that the Daily Mail, which spearheads the campaign for Gary McKinnon, refers to Talha and Baba as other unwanted guests. Exact quote. I mean, that says a lot. So.
Why? Because they're British citizens, or?
Yeah, they're British citizens who were born and grew up here, pay their taxes here, studied here. They're referred to as other unwanted guests in the Daily Mail. In the same newspaper which campaigns for British justice for British citizens seems to have the idea of who's less British and
the Daily Mail
who's less worthy of equal representation. And also, in addition, an academic called Nisha Kapoor wrote an extensive investigative academic paper in a journal called The State of Race, investigating the disparity of responses from people like Lord Carlisle to thing. And as you said, Davis doesn't know very much about the case, but he's already concluded this is not about this and that.
Institutional racism is quite a charge, isn't it?
I've toured the country up and down. I've been to every single major city in Scotland, Wales, England, and the audience conclusions seem to draw that. That's not something I'd tell them, that's what they seem to conclude. Not only that, Gary Mulgrew, who you just mentioned, of the NatWest 3, who's my friend, because I'm friends with all the extradited, he himself said, if it breaks my heart to say this, but if your brother, was a white guy, this wouldn't actually happen.
Is it to do with race, or is it to do with race or religion? What if he'd been a convert? It's not.
I think it's a mixture of both.
Right.
And we can look at the American prison system and how many, I think more black people are in the American prison system than under apartheid South Africa, and same with Latinos. There was a Latino American citizen called Jose Partilla, and they completely stripped him of his constitutional rights.
Okay, David Davis, last comment in this half hour.
Yeah.
You can see it from Hamja's point of view, from Adnan there, who called us as well. Can't you see it? You can see it from the point of view of how the perception is, and you might well feel that way if you were a British Muslim.
I'm very familiar, Nicky, with the perception of British Muslims of a number of aspects of counter-terrorism law. Indeed, I actually think I've said before that the principal victims of terrorism, of so-called Islamic terrorism, I don't consider it as Islamic at all, but so-called Islamic terrorism, are actually Muslim citizens, because the laws feel to them like they're focused against them. 90 days. I mean, I defeated 90 days, and 42 days was my by-election. These are issues, actually, which, of course, do make people feel oppressed. But bear in mind, I mean, the cases of the NatWest 3 that has just been mentioned, that Mr. Hassan just mentioned, the case of Mr. Tapin, and other cases, not Muslims, not Asians, are ones which were lost, as it were, from the point of view of the campaigners, and they were taken to America and they went through the system. The other side of the coin, I mean, this sort of attack on the Daily Mail, I mean, I don't hold any brief for any newspaper, but they're the ones who actually ran the campaign on Stephen Lawrence hugely successfully. And as I said, they supported my campaign on torture, which involved virtually everybody involved in it was an Asian Muslim of one sort or another, the person who'd suffered, the victims, that is, not the perpetrators. So I just think that I can understand why people feel the way they do, but what I think you shouldn't do is leap to the conclusion that this is aimed against your race. This is a bad piece of law. Understand this, a bad piece of law. Somebody said, one of your commentators said, this is, it is undermining our sovereignty, it's undermining our justice. We should fix it for everybody, not for one race or another, or not for one religion or another, not for one community or another, but for every British citizen. We need to fix this law.
David Davis, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Mohammed Shafiq, and also Hamja Ahsan, and some excellent callers. You can call us 0500 909 693. With my apologies that we're running late. It's 9:35. Here's Simon with the weather.
Thank you, Nicky. We've got some wet weather spreading its way northward across England and Wales at the moment. It's pushing into Scotland currently, so while in northern areas are staying dry at the moment with some sunshine, you'll soon see that rain spreading in as we go through the rest of this morning and into the afternoon. And with the cloud and the rain, a rather cool afternoon with only temperatures getting to around about 9 or 10 degrees. Now, for Northern Ireland, a pretty damp start of the day here. Some heavy pulses of rain pushing their way through for the rest of today, and temperatures getting to 12 degrees. And then for England and Wales, well, the heavy rain is now gradually working its way northeast. We've still got some of that rain for the far north of England and some cloud and some damp weather for eastern parts of England. But that will clear, and you'll soon see the sunshine coming through. So while for many across England and Wales, as we go into lunchtime and this afternoon, there'll be some sunshine around. There will be some pretty heavy showers pushing into Wales, southwest England and southeast England during this afternoon. Quite windy conditions, and with the wind, the strength of the wind, and with high tides, there is a concern around coastal areas of Wales and southwest England for the high tide periods this morning and this evening, that there could be some coastal flooding. Log on to the Environment Agency website for details about that if you're concerned at all. But elsewhere, as I said, mainly dry. Temperatures getting to about 13, 14 degrees in northern areas, 14 to 17 degrees in the south.
Andy, unemployment.
Yeah, this is big news, Nikki. There's been a sharp fall in unemployment by 50,000 compared to the previous 3 months. Unemployment now stands at 7.9%. That's the first time it's been down below 8% for quite a while. 7.9%, 2.53 million people unemployed. And also the news that over the last year, 500,000 jobs have been generated. Average earnings went up by just 1.7%, less than inflation. So the big squeeze continues. But unemployment continues to astonish in how relatively benign it's been, given the fact that the last statistics showed that we were still in a double-dip recession.
9:37.
On digital radio, digital TV, mobile and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
With the BBC News on 5 Live, I'm Rachel Hodges. Charities are warning that around 500,000 disabled people could lose out under the universal credit system, which comes into force next year. But the Welfare Minister, Lord Freud, has told 5 Live that disabled people won't be out of pocket. The Football Association has complained to UEFA about racist abuse at England's under-21s game in Serbia last night. The team say they were pelted with stones, coins and seats, and there were scuffles between the two sides at the final whistle. The Royal Bank of Scotland is to leave the insurance scheme set up to protect banks from the global financial crisis. Its decision is being seen as another step on the road to RBS returning to the private sector. A man's due in court in London later, charged with the kidnap of a British photographer and his Dutch colleague, who were held hostage in Syria for 10 days. Shahjul Islam, who's 26 and British, was arrested after flying into the UK from Egypt last week. And there were angry exchanges between President Obama and Republican challenger Mitt Romney during their second televised debate. With 3 weeks to go until the presidential election, the pair answered questions from an audience of undecided voters. That's the news. Sport now with George.
Thank you. The chairman of the Professional Footballers Association has called for Serbia to receive a significant ban from international football. Clark Carlisle says the scenes that marred England under-21's victory there last night was deplorable, with the FA complaining to UEFA that their players were subjected to racist and physical abuse.
Banning them for a start, from any tournament would be progress. But I think if it's significant, if it's a number, if it's a couple of tournaments, then that will cause that nation to address the issue that has deprived them of international competition. The message has to come from the top down that this behaviour will not be tolerated.
Well, the senior side will try again this afternoon after their game in Poland was washed out. We'll get going again with 5 Live Sport this afternoon at 3:45. Former manager Graham Taylor is confident that today's game will be on.
Once it actually stopped raining, they actually covered the pitch. And by the time we left the stadium, because they have the heating system on there, you could see actually that the pitch was already in far better condition than it previously had been. So I'll see no problem at all, because I think they will keep it covered. They'll keep the roof on.
Well, let's hope so. Fingers crossed. Former Scotland boss George Burley, meanwhile, has called for Craig Levein to be given more time as national manager. Defeat in Belgium last night leaves Scotland bottom of their World Cup qualifying group. Levein says he won't walk away, and it's for others to make that decision. Burley says that Levein needs to be judged at the end of the campaign.
We shouldn't be bottom of the league, when you look at the 4 games we've had. With 6 games left, there's still a lot to play for as far as developing the team. That's the most important thing. We have got some good players there. We have now got 7 and 8 players playing in the Premiership, so they should be keep improving. And I think we've definitely got to see what happens between now and the end of the group.
Manager Michael O'Neill declared himself proud to manage Northern Ireland after a 1-1 draw in Portugal. Wales were beaten by Croatia 2-0, and the Republic of Ireland won 4-1 at the Faroe Islands. Cycling Australia has sacked elite men's road coordinator Matt White after he confessed to using performance-enhancing drugs while riding for Lance Armstrong's US Postal Team. David Price says Tyson Fury is an idiot and wants to fight the fellow British heavyweight next year. This after Fury abused him on Twitter. And 5 Live Sport tonight. This is after the special 5 Live Sport for the football this afternoon. Tonight's programme from 7, Mark Pugach hosting in the studio and joined by England's rugby union head coach Stuart Lancaster and his coaching team. So Andy Fowle and Graham Rowntree will be in. Mike Catt will be in too. This ahead of the autumn internationals. They will outline their vision for the future of English rugby and assess the challenge of facing Fiji and the Southern Hemisphere's Big Three.
On digital and online.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
Now, 5 Live Breakfast. Your call with Nikki Campbell. Call 0500 909 693. Calls are free from most landlines, but some networks and mobile operators will charge. Text 85058. Text will be charged at your standard message rate.
This is BBC Radio 5 Live.
No, listen, very quickly, George. I got, when I was in Brisbane, I got you a book, and I got Rachel a book. I got you a book on Nathan Hindmarsh, the rugby league great. I got her a book on Petro
Civoniceva.
Yeah, the rugby league great. She's left hers.
I know.
What's going on?
That can only be an oversight in her hasty departure from the building. I'll make sure she catches up with her, don't worry.
Rugby league greats for both of you. And you have both of them.
She'll be gutted. She was delighted as well.
See her face.
She was made up.
What's that? We're just getting more of a breakdown on those unemployment figures for you. As Andy told us, UK unemployment fell by 50,000 between June and August. Unemployment in Scotland, though, is up by 7,000. That's a rise of 10,000 compared to the same quarter last year. The Scottish jobless rate now stands at 8.2%, which is above the UK average of 7.9%. Interesting how the Scottish government will react to that. Right, back to the case of extradition, which we're discussing this morning, with some very interesting voices on the calls coming in on that. Let me just remind you of basically, I mentioned two names at the top of the programme of this hour, Gary McKinnon and Syed Talha Ahsan, both men having Asperger's syndrome, both British, both wanted by the US authorities. That's where the similarities end. Gary McKinnon is here. Syed Talha Ahsan has been extradited. Is this, as the Ramadan Foundation have said, blatant racism? Is this, as George Galloway has said, blatant racism? Does Gary McKinnon's race help keep him in the country? I'm going to speak to Keith Vaz in a minute, the MP. Hello, are you there?
Yes.
We are quorate. We also have Melanie in Manchester and Shahid in Bradford. Shahid, good morning, sir. Melanie, good morning. Melanie, good morning to you. What would you like to say, Melanie?
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's all yours.
Oh, right. I'm going on about this story. I'm sick to death of these blooming British Muslims or Muslims taking the race card to excuse about the blooming terrorism for an excuse that's going to kill their own people and us and the American citizens in the West. They don't want to live over here with our rules. Why don't they go back to Pakistan or wherever?
We're talking about British people.
Well, they're no loyalty, have they? They're being indoctrinated by their own communities. They don't even...
Sorry. Sorry, that's hilarious. Sorry to butt in.
No, I'm afraid it isn't.
It's hilarious. It's absolutely scandalous that you've just associated terrorism with all the British Muslims.
Been doing terrorism.
All right, well, let's hear from Shahid. Go on, Shahid.
Islam. The actual word Islam means peace and submission.
Oh, is it? Why is that Pakistani girl not allowed to learn in Pakistan in her own...
Any generalisation is incorrect, really, if you think about it. We're all made of...
Let's get back to this issue. That's a very serious issue. Some would say it's an appalling practice. Some would say it's a cultural issue. I know British Pakistani Muslims in this country who are friends of mine who are absolutely appalled at various practices in Pakistan. And they're absolutely appalled at that. And what about Jimmy Savile? Was Jimmy Savile a Pakistani? Right, Shahid. Shahid, let's get back to this issue. Let's get back to the Shahid. Is this a racist issue?
I think there's a clear contradiction, there's hypocrisy. A similar case, Asperger's, risk of suicide. You've got a coloured person and a non-coloured person. One's extradited, one isn't. You can't get it as black and white as that. The system in every walk of life, is against, well, not against, but there's a prejudice. We've learned to live with that prejudice the best we can. But situations like this, when they arise, they make you angry. They make you angry that, as a tax-paying profession, I've lived by the rules, not done anything wrong. But then you get a clear contradiction like this, and it makes you stand back and think, what the hell am I doing here, living in this system that's clearly prejudiced between a British Muslim, a Muslim that may be coloured, and a white person. But, ultimately, what can we do? We can carry on with life, be patient.
OK, you're very angry about this. I'm going to put Keith Vaz on to speak to you, MP, chairs the Home Affairs Select Committee. Keith Vaz, you hear Shahid, extremely disillusioned. Speak to him. Tell him why he's wrong to be in your mind.
Well, can I first say... No, you can't. We haven't got time. I want you to speak to Shahid.
Well, we've dealt with the issues.
You've asked me on the programme, and therefore you have to hear my views or don't have my views.
You don't want to speak to Shahid?
Well, no, because Shahid is in Bradford, and I will take on board his points, but I'm not here to answer Shahid. I was invited to take part in a discussion. Where you were asking me a question. I'm trying to put this...
Discussion is... The key is discussion, isn't it?
I'm trying to put this into context and deal with the Shahid's point about why was this decision taken now. I have actually spoken to Babar Ahmed and Talha Ahsan by video link from London before they were removed from this country. I think there is a real danger in the way in which the government sometimes lumps a whole lot of cases together. Abu Hamza's case was quite different from the case of Babar Ahmed. And I'm absolutely delighted about the Gary McKinnon decision. This is something that my committee has been calling for 3 years, that you should have a forum bar, that a British judge should decide whether or not a case should be tried in this country. If that had been accepted in 2009 by the previous Labour government, then Babar Ahmed would have gone through this system in this country. Unfortunately, the Secretary made her decision yesterday, and Babar Ahmed had left the country. I think he's got a different case to the case of Abu Hamza. All these cases need to be dealt with on their merits, and Gary McKinnon's case should never have been the subject of extradition, in my view. He ought to have been tried in the country, and that's exactly what's going to happen. In Christopher Tappin's case, that also should apply. He should not have had to go back to America to face a trial there. And Babar Ahmed and Talha Ahsan are in the same position. They were running websites in this country, and if they've committed any breaches of its British law, and they ought to have been tried here. And I think that is the principle that underpins all this. We should have had this 3 years ago when my committee originally asked the last Labour government to bring in a forum bar, to bring in an evidence test, and to make sure that British citizens were treated in the same way as American citizens. I think it's a tragedy that the decision was only made yesterday.
Is it racism?
Yeah, clearly.
Keith Vaz, is it?
Clearly.
All right, let's hear Keith's answer. Wait a minute, let's hear Keith Vaz's answer. Keith Vaz, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I think what it is a complete lack of understanding on the part of government.
It's easier to hear.
Well, hang on, wait a minute, Shahid. Keith Vaz, carry on.
The extradition treaty with America is unfair. I'm afraid it's unbalanced and it's unfair. And in 2009, we said this to Alan Johnson, that actually introduced the forum bar in 2009. If that had happened, Shahid and Melanie, we would have had a fairer system whereby someone like Mohammed and Alan would have been able to have had their case put to a British judge, and he would have decided whether or not they should have gone to America. I think these cases are best tried here. Gary McKinnon's case is best tried here. He's already said he did what they said he'd do, and Babar Ahmed has admitted having a website. He has not admitted being involved in terrorist activities, and he has not conceded any of the cases against him. And I think the whole system has conspired badly to ensure that justice has not been done, and I think that's very bad.
No, I think you're going off the point now. The basic point, basically, is that the basis of extradition, can we appeal against extradition? What's the purpose of the appeal? Okay, he's got Asperger's, potential suicide. Oh, he's got Asperger's and potential suicide. So why was he extradited and why was he not? Simple.
Well, because at that stage we didn't have the system that the Home Secretary has just put into effect. Secondly, I think ministers should have this
again that was put into effect.
No, I mean, I think Alan Johnson should have exercised his discretion to keep Gary McKinnon in the country and to have exercised a change in the law and had a forum bar which would have allowed Talha Ahsan
professional Muslim, let me tell you, as a professional Muslim, I'm very peaceful, and I tolerate, and I always tell people to be patient, but not everyone's like me.
Well, I'm glad that you've taken this view, and I think what we need to do is to make... There are other cases coming up. There will be other cases of this kind. I think the change in the law that Theresa May announced yesterday is fair for all British citizens, no matter what their... Just apply to those who are not of ethnic origin. It'll apply to everyone, and that's what we should have had in 2009. It's too late for some people now. It's too late for Christopher Tappin. I mean, Christopher Tappin, with the greatest respect to Shahid, is not someone of Asian origin. He is a person who is not of Asian origin.
We can always throw in a single case.
Keith Vaz makes a very good point, Shahid. Keith Vaz makes a very strong point there, which lots of people are making. He makes it very well about Christopher Tappin, the retired businessman, or Giles Derby, or Gary Mulgrew, who's been mentioned, or David Birmingham, the NatWest 3.
Yeah, there will be cases like that. I'm not disagreeing, but generally you'll find that the number of cases towards Muslims and Asians are far greater than whites and non-muslims.
Why is that? You believe that's racism. Some would argue it's because of the proportion of some people in Muslim communities who are involved in jihadism. Graham has a point on that. Graham in Bradford. Hi, Graham.
Hello, Nicky. Well, most people just want to get on and live their lives and have an happy carry on. But some of these young lads at the edges, they get wound up and they get a bit rads with it all. And they go on 37. They go on certain sites and stuff.
Yeah, just when it gets to the extreme where, it's clearly happening on a day-to-day basis, and then there's clear hypocrisy like that, it does make you stand back and think.
I'm still on.
Who's that?
What's going on here? I'll get into conversations, Nicky.
Sorry, mate. Sorry.
All right,
you can carry on.
You carry on. Graham, you carry on.
Sorry, mate.
All right, no worries. Yeah, I'm just saying these young lads who get involved in things and they get a bit insane with it. And I see the point about the comparisons with the Asian guys being sent over with the Asperger's and everything. That seems a bit hypocritical. But I think there should actually be a defence across the board for anyone of any faith, because there's Christians and other people who are fanatics and zealots.
That's right.
And there should be a defence of religious insanity. Because, no, honestly, Nicky, you might laugh, but...
No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the concept.
Incorrect interpretation.
The concept, yeah, go on.
Yeah, these people, they are temporarily insane, really.
You will have a lot of people sympathising with you for that point. I think there's a lot of people saying, yes, Graham's made a very good point. What about a young lad, Keith Vaz, who gets caught up in this sort of thing? We had the same thing back in the 70s and 80s, didn't we, with Irish republicanism?
We did indeed. You're absolutely right. And the way to deal with it, we produced a report last year called The Roots of Radicalism. Where does radicalism start in the community? And actually, what young British Muslims want to be is part of the mainstream of society. They want the same opportunities, they want the same fairness, they want the same ability to be able to compete like everybody else. And I think that those who become radicalized, and we think that the internet does play a part in this, rather than the one-to-one meetings, the addresses and other issues of that kind. We rejected all this. We don't think that this actually happens in places of worship. We think that this happens, by and large, by radicalization. People feel marginalized. And I think that there is a responsibility on society and the community, and I think the community is seized of this. We have people like Shahid, who describes himself as a professional. I don't know what his profession is, but there is someone who has been able to get his job and get his profession by going through the mainstream of British life. And that's what makes our country so special. That's why we won the Olympics. We won the Olympic Games and staged it in Britain because we are the most diverse country in the world. There is no other country like this. I came as a first-rate immigrant. I was 9 years of age. How many other countries would you see someone who was a first-generation immigrant get elected to Parliament and have the privilege of serving in the positions that I've served? Only in Britain. In no other country could this happen. I'm not saying that therefore everything is all right. It clearly isn't. We need to continue to address these issues, which we need to do in a positive and constructive way. We have to be fair and equal, and equality and fairness should underpin what is the most important of British values.
Shaheed.
Yeah, quite a few points raised there. I think radicalisation in itself, I think that's basically incorrect interpretation which goes across all religions. I was talking to fellow Muslims older than myself, just on a few subjects of marriage, second wife, and the interpretation that some people have of it and how it impacts on their lives is absolutely massive. It's as simple as that. Islam is peaceful, it's about patience, it's about respect, but like I say, it's easier to hate than it is to love. And if we don't understand anything, we'd rather not sort of try to understand it and just go with the flow. And that's what seems to be happening against Islam and Muslims.
Look, Shahid, I understand that is a strain of thought, but actually I represent 10,000 Muslims in Leicester East, and every day of my life I come in contact with the community. I see a thriving community that is playing its part in mainstream British life. You go to any public service.
I think it's not going to be long. I think it's not going to be long. You're testing the patience. You're testing patience. And hopefully people will be patient and continue to strive as they do. But there's only so much you can push a person before they fall off.
Shahid, can I just give you an example? Yesterday, in front of the Home Affairs Select Committee, I had the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire about the South Yorkshire grooming cases. And it's been in the media, and they talked about the ethnic origins of the people responsible. And there you had a Chief Constable coming before a Select Committee of the House and saying he did not believe that race played a fact in this. And that is not the reason why people...
Shahid, can I ask you a question? Shahid, can I ask you... Gentlemen.
Yeah, you certainly can.
Abu Hamza. I met him a few times, interviewed him a few times, know a fair bit about it. He's a bad man, Shahid.
He's a bad man. It's not Islam. It's not the religion. He's a bad sheep. One bad person doesn't mean you everything that a Christian white person has done. Could I relate that to his religion? But it seems to me that when an Asian Muslim or a British Muslim does something wrong, a so-called Muslim...
Do you remember those crowds listening to Abu Hamza speaking outside the Finsbury Park Mosque?
He's completely...
He had a constituency, though. He had a constituency, didn't he?
Yes, okay, fair point. But, he was still wrong. If the masses follow, doesn't mean that the masses are correct.
Mm-hmm. He's a middle-aged man, Nick, Abu Hamza. These young lads are just young lads getting caught up.
Black sheep exist in our communities. You can't. Whenever I hear a crime that's committed and it's a Muslim, the first thing I hear is that crime being associated with a religion.
That's because people who perpetrated the crime say they did it in the name of that religion, and that's the problem. That's what they're saying, and that's what.
But when they say that, when they commit a crime, and say that they're a madman. They're clearly a madman because all religions are peaceful and law-abiding.
Well, they should be, and the vast majority of those who practice them are. Keith Faz, final point. There's a real danger here that people are associating the likes of Babar Ahmed and Mr. Ahsan with Abu Hamza and just lumping them all together. There are very important differences and nuances. 15-second answer.
You're absolutely right, and I think it's a mistake to do that. You can't say Abu Hamza and others. Each case, as the Gary McKinnon case shows, should be treated on its merits and separately, and not together.
Thank you very much, Keith Faz. Thank you to Graham there in Bradford and Shaheed in Bradford. Have a really good Wednesday.